Good morning, everyone, and welcome. I'm so excited to have you here with us today at the 7th Commercial Vehicle Business Summit. That's right. This biannual event started in 2021 with the belief that it was a very important thing to have this universe of commercial vehicles gathered together, that there were a lot of very siloed meetings and very focused things around uh, fleet, around EV, around different types of accessories, upfitting, etc. But nowhere did we get together and gather and talk about it as a business. And it is a huge business. As you can see here, I love this industry. It is the hardworking, salt of the earth, backbone of the US economy, and wonderful people. And they'll tell you anything. They're communicative. They're not defensive and worried that everybody's trying to take advantage of them, which, by the way, having been in certain types of industries, that is what I experienced. And so in addition to that, just so you know, 80% of our GDP is driven by commercial vehicles. So it's very important. And I have my favorite slide that I'm going to share with you right now. So let me get this going. As you can see here, this is the entire ecosystem of the commercial industry. And the commercial vehicle industry is approaching $2 trillion. What's so unique about it is that each one of these elements is different and is supplied and provided by different companies than those that serve the consumer retail automotive industry. And that's what makes it so special. And so gathering all these people together is important. And I am so excited about our sessions this time. As you may have heard, our theme is connecting the dots. And that is what we plan on doing. We have some very exciting speakers. And to start off, we always start off with kind of where the industry is today and move into talking with different groups as we start looking at a broader view, where the trends are and where we think everything is going. So I hope you're able to stick with us for the 2 days. It's about 4.5, 5 hours each day. If not, as you were very smart and you registered, you'll be getting an email once the videos are posted. So all the sessions are being recorded. We also invite you to join us at the sessions when we have our little, I would call it speed dating that goes on, the connections, and just have a great time because you can feel good about the industry that you're in, that our industry really delivers value to everyone. So having said that, I'm excited about introducing our very first session. And, you know, Greg Brink and I met fairly recently, but it turns out that we have a lot, not only of friends in common, but also a passion for this industry. Greg's been with JD Power for about 5 years now. He has over 20 years of experience in the automotive space, everything from OEM to tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 digital marketing. And currently, he is as fascinated and is involved with the commercial vehicle data as I am. So, Greg, I'd really like you to come on stage now.
All right. Thank you, Catherine. And I didn't know you were going to put your net worth up there, 1.8 trillion. That's impressive. Well, hey, thank you for the invite. Like Catherine said, we actually met at the Green Truck Summit in Indianapolis last month. And I was fascinated by the conversation, not only from just a partnership perspective, but then we actually met here in Detroit last week for dinner, and we really didn't talk much about business. We just got to know each other, and I was absolutely impressed with you as a person and how you view the world, how you view the industry. So thank you for the invite. My experience at JD Power, yes, has been traditionally, with the digital marketing aspect of it. But as of the last year, we made a number of acquisitions. We bought a company called ZappyRide, and some other EV data companies, including a company called AutoVista, that gives us more of a global perspective on the commercial space. So I've been very involved with a lot of the alternative electrification initiatives here at JD Power and the data that powers that. So I hope I'm lucky enough to share some of the insights that you may or may not have known previously, and maybe some new stuff that you can look forward to. So thanks, Catherine. Let's get started.
Yeah, and before we do, I also need to thank Escalent. So Escalent is one of our sponsors, but also they are, I've known them for a decade now, and they are one of the few research and primary, secondary now research companies that focuses on the commercial vehicle space. And so a lot of the data today that we're going to talk about was provided by Escalent, and with JD Power throwing in a few things and Work Truck Solutions contributing. So hopefully this kind of gives you a great overview of what's going on. I love this. The impact of how complex this industry is. We have seen over 25,000 unique configurations in our time of looking at inventory. And this is just the cab type, the chassis model or van model, the body type, the manufacturer of the body, and the body model. It's not trim, transmission, engine. It's not any of that. This would be in the gazillions. I don't know. That's probably not a good word, but I just like this impact and the fact that all of these vehicles are so important, right?
Yeah, it's incredible. Yep.
And Greg, we were talking about this yesterday. The purpose for this slide is just to kind of show that light green is this is all broken down by types of vehicles, right? That what's happened since January of 2020 to through March of 24. And the light green was the all different kinds of vans. And so we all experience that, right, Greg? How many times did you have somebody come and drop something off at your house, right?
Well, there's 5 boxes on my doorstep right now. I'm sure my wife ordered something, from Amazon.
and if we all think back a little bit, before that, they were kind of tracking the adoption of this very slowly and how people had, the push and pull me of in face shopping and all of that kind of stuff. And this changed our lives. Changed the world.
Yeah.
And yet the commercial space has been dependable because we saw all of the, the important people that continued to work, all the vocations while everybody had to stay home. So this is a little bit more, kind of, I don't know if it's trend looking, but you can see here the orange is where vehicles were actually on lot. Now, for those of you in the industry, certainly dealers, certainly upfitters, you recognize how bad it got. That it was so bad that there were customers that were buying used vehicles that would have never, ever bought a used vehicle before just to keep their business running. Right, Greg?
Yeah, it's interesting. If you look at March 2022 on this graph, I was able, after we talked last night, Catherine, I pulled some information out of our Power Information Network PIN Plus product. And this will just give some people some perspective on the retail passenger vehicle side for dealers. That number was about 29.7 days, or 29.7 days in inventory. So if you look at the orange bar here for commercial, and we'll fast forward to current because I have the March data for this year too. That number has gone up to 45.9. So these macroeconomic trends that you're talking about follow that same exact curve on the retail dealer side for passenger vehicles. And so it's amazing where we were and where we are today. It's actually commercial went up at a much higher trajectory than the retail dealer network. But this is very interesting to see how inventory has impacted sales.
And yes, and days to turn starts increasing, and of course that's a tough place to be for the industry of the providers of the vehicles because of course interest rates are so high as well, right?
Correct.
So this is the space that we live in right now.
Yeah.
So, I think that what's happening is that, we're just thinking differently. There's so many pressures that are coming on to this space, including, of course, the advanced clean fuels. And you have a lot of information and background. I know that you've been tracking this a lot, right?
Yeah, we do a lot of work with the Department of Energy through the Argonne laboratories. They actually literally bought every study that we publish to really guide infrastructure strategy and guidance around everything from EV adoption down to the zip code level to public and private charging. So yes, this is near and dear to my heart. And
Well,
I'm
they're
excited.
starting to understand that maybe they need to slow it down just a tiny bit, right? This pushed it
It
out 2
is.
years.
That's right.
That's basically what this did.
Yeah.
And, that helps a little bit, but I know that you are very excited about bringing forward this recent news, right? Just the 4th of April.
Yeah, this just broke. It's part of the broader Greenhouse Gas Reduction Act that actually falls under the Inflation Reduction Act. But this is $20 billion of the 27 billion that the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund provides. This is now going to disseminate down to the local community level. So 14 billion of the 20 billion is going to go directly into primarily disadvantaged communities that don't necessarily have the access or the capital to build out upgrades to the electrification network and grids. But also with the utility companies, listen, $1.8 trillion industry, but it's going to cost about 1.3 trillion to just get the upgrades to try to meet that forecast. And so these communities are going to need storage, distribution, and planning to facilitate this adoption rate. I found this very interesting, Catherine. You and I talked about this. This funding is going to go into contractor marketplace to build out these charging stations.
Yeah, kind of like a double benefit for our industry, right?
It really is, and we're seeing it. And then there's this other portion that's will benefit everybody in our industry. The Clean Communities Investment Fund. These are working with banks and credit unions. The Climate United Fund gets a big portion of this money to really build out education portals. This also will go into charging stations. The banks will be able to give zero-emission vehicle loans, and all these projects that communities need to support this infrastructure. And this is both not only passenger vehicle but commercial, because this is going to be massive investment, and it's good to see that the EPA is taking this serious.
Right. Well, we take it seriously too, and I'm kind of excited. This having participated in the Commercial Vehicle Business Summit now, right, since 2021, our 7th one right now. Last year, I started realizing, well, I'd already realized at least half of the discussion was always had something to do with advanced fuels, right? Because it's such a influence right now. And so last year we started working on, and we launched New Propel. Just for those of you, you can either go to newpropel.com or you can go to Convoy, the national marketplace. It's also a kind of a resource element on there. And we've just started collecting and curating all the things that we can find around commercial advanced fuel solutions, because it's so much right now, and it's so much of it is very single viewpoint, or very much around trying to get one thing to happen instead of thinking about it broadly and what may be a good decision for a company, right? So I'm very, very excited about that, and I'm looking forward to you guys being contributors to this, honestly, because of all your data. So Escalent has a couple of things going for them in addition to the historic primary research. For example, they've been running Fleet Advisory Hub for over 8 or 9 years now, which is, surveying fleets, kind of mid-sized fleets. But they've also done a lot of research on both on the commercial and the retail side on adoption. And so And then they recently acquired Ryan and Associates, which is a group that does the chassis, the predictions or the estimates on the chassis production in conjunction with all the OEMs. So using all of that, they've come up with a pretty conservative commercial share of zero emission vehicles. And of course, part of that is just all the things that are pressurizing this decision, right? First of all, what the three main ones are: what is your fleet size? Can you afford to, kind of diverge from what you do every day to something that's brand new and that has so many different things about it, from how you fuel to how the people have to use it, and safety and all that, right? So
Mhm.
a bigger the fleet, the more likely they are to want to need to, because that's the other thing, they're more visible and they need to be seen to be making changes. Geography, sorry, got a drop off there. But anyway, geography is another big thing. And you and I talked a lot about that, Greg, about what the impact is. I have a chart, but I didn't include it, about how quickly the distance available drops when the cold hits. And you live in Michigan, so you probably, and I know that you're an EV driver, so you probably have all of this in your back pocket, right?
Guilty
So
as charged. Yeah.
yeah. And then the use case. And of course, there's a big difference between delivering bread or delivering potato chips and driving with a crane and a welder and all of these heavy things, and et cetera. So those are three really big initial adoption things. So, and I appreciate Escalante has built this. This is really a great overview of the ecosystem of adoption, right?
Mhm.
And I know you guys are working a lot with utilities. You want to start there?
Yeah, if we can start there, and I'm glad Escalante put this on here because I remember working at GM, and I worked in the OnStar division, and our telematics unit was always trying to get fleets to understand, what you just said, mileage, geography. What does it look like in terms of, distance traveled, and then what does that mean in terms of like gas prices and what type of vehicle? They always had a challenge monetizing that at GM, even though they had that data. But what's important with this ecosystem is you've got all these connections to servers, you've got all this data. You can now be very sophisticated in how you present this. So
Yeah.
you brought up utilities. We were kind of blindsided by this about a year ago. These utility companies kept coming to us asking us for data,
Mhm.
and wow, I never thought I would see the day. But these utility companies now, I mean, these are Austin Energy, DTE, Duquesne Light and Power, Anaheim, PG&E. These are massive utility companies that are begging for adoption. So they're actually putting marketplaces on their websites now, vehicle inventory, believe it or not.
We talked about that. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I never thought I'd see the day, but if you think about it, what a great opportunity for them to create a new channel of revenue, engage more with their customers. Obviously, there's a vested interest in using the electric grid. And we'll in a slide, a couple more, we'll see how one of these companies is using this data. But wow, the utility companies are going full force, and some of these companies are actually building out a field team to talk to dealers to get them to transition over customers into EV. So it's a
It's cool because this graphic, we've used it for a couple years now, right?
yeah,
And as we're talking, I'm looking at this and I'm saying, a lot has really been done. Look at how product. We're going to see a slide later about product availability.
yeah.
Fleet adoption. I think if maybe what we'll do for our fall session, which by the way is October 24th and 25th, I think. I'll have to double check on that. We'll make sure everybody knows. I'm sure we'll have a slide, but we've already set our fall one. And we'll have to do a kind of analysis by the size of the fleet on adoption. Infrastructure, there's been so many conversations and there's been so many changes around that. And of course, having a single sort of standardized approach to that has been big news, right?
Yeah.
Suppliers, we're going to talk a little bit later about, kind of upfitters doing special things, right? Upfitters are starting to really jump into being able to, I will say 2 years ago at the NTEA's Upfitter Summit, I was talking to a guy and he said, yeah, I said, are you excited about EV? And he goes, well, I'm excited, but we've created, done all this work and all this design, and we've done two, right? And so that's kind of, the challenge of
Yeah.
transitioning into a space, lots of investment. And of
Yeah.
course, we're
Yeah, I think
covering, yeah,
Yeah,
yes.
I think the utility companies are banking on, less regulation with some of the new products and services they can offer. So it's interesting. I love that it's on here.
Mhm.
But some of these companies that are heavily regulated, specifically utility companies, are trying to create new channels of revenue that aren't governed by regulators, right?
Well, that'll stimulate some stuff, won't it? Oh.
Hopefully, yeah.
So, down to kind of some of the day-to-day, oops, I skipped ahead to kind of show a little bit of the kind of day-to-day stuff, right? Battery concerns, things that people think about, battery life. We talked about use cases, life cycle. I was at the CAR conference, which is the Conference of Automotive Remarketing. I was on the
Mhm.
panel about EVs and remarketing and how, what's that going to look like? How are we going to value those vehicles? And we talked about maybe doing a valuation. Maybe we could do some conversation in the fall about valuation in
Mhm.
this space, because I know you guys are doing some of that.
Yep.
Um, Upfits, it's a different upfit. And just, like I've seen the diagrams where you drill a hole through
Mhm.
the chassis, and you don't do stuff like that
Mhm.
for an electric vehicle, right? We did talk about the standardization of charging stations. I think that's going to make that's what you were telling me yesterday or last week about, what is it? Tesla's charging is up 98% of the time, and the others are up 25% of the time. I mean, like, how can you have
Terrifying.
a business like
Yeah,
that,
I
right?
know. Yeah.
So, and then I'm gonna go now to the what I think is the coolest slide of all, because TCO is so hard to do in this space, and look what we've got here. Go, Greg.
So this is the utility company, right? So they're very progressive in trying to get adoption up. This has been live for, probably 6 months now, Pacific Gas and Electric. They had a huge motivation to get commercial truck organizations to kind of glom onto this initiative. And so they put together, using a lot of the data that we have, a total cost of ownership tool for these folks to leverage in understanding what the true ROI could potentially be, um, in addition to incentives, rebates, carbon credits that could be involved. And so the way they wanted this laid out was they wanted a lot of inputs, very similar to filters you see on a lot of websites, where you could put in construction costs, right? You could look at what is it going to cost to actually build out the public charging. And I just kind of mocked this up with a medium truck. But I put some just basic assumptions about construction costs. I probably went a little bit light on this, but then the other inputs would be, what is the average diesel price? So like California, it's what is it out there?
Uh,
$5.50.
I
It's
can't
insane,
even look
right? So
anymore. Yeah,
if you scroll down, which this isn't live, but if you were to
right.
scroll down on the filters, you could put diesel cost in there. You could put things like your zip code, so you can see exactly down to the level of zip code what incentives and rebates you qualify for, whether you're
Does
tax
this only
exempt.
work for the PG&E market area? Is that basically
Yeah, but most of these, every utility company that I mentioned, Austin Energy has this.
great?
Uh, yeah, a lot
So
of even the OEMs are using this data now.
great.
So
That
you
is
can see with this type of calculation in the background and these assumptions that you can manually input, you can clearly see that the benefit far exceeds traditional ICE type model. And I think, and I don't know if you have my 3T slide, Catherine, but this goes to kind of consideration. We heard from the Cobb County Commissioner at the Green Truck Summit that the biggest problem in adoption is the human problem. And I think of my own journey getting into EV. I live in Detroit, so it was a very big barrier for me to come home with an EV in my neighborhood, which is surrounded by Ford, GM, and Stellantis employees. And I had to get over the hurdle of all the traditional things you hear about, the battery life, the charging station map, and all this other stuff. But really, what convinced me was the journey, right? I found that if you could meet me at the time and place of my choosing, which is, hey, if I'm at 11 o'clock at night and I want to go on an OEM website or Convoy or some site, I need to have the information ready for me to make those decisions, right? So PG did a great job. They encapsulated all that with that data. Now I have one-stop shop. I can get all the government incentives, rebates. I can look at how does kilowatts per hour convert into diesel prices. That's the biggest hurdle is the customer information, transparency, which again we just saw on PG&E's site, and with what Catherine's doing with her content site. Give the customer the transparent information so that they can have all these informed places to go to understand what does it really mean to move from an ICE engine to once you remove those barriers and get over battery anxiety and all this other stuff that really post-purchase doesn't come into play, then you're moving this customer down the funnel and getting over those psychological hurdles. And then the transaction. I will say the passenger vehicle dealers are more progressive, primarily driven by COVID to get digital retailing tools out there.
Right.
But you have sites like Convoy and some of these marketplaces on the utility companies that are really trying to get this consumer to be very high intent in trying to actually move them into a transaction.
Right.
And so if you can meet these three T's, this playbook is really what passenger vehicle used to move the market share up to almost 10%. If you can get these three T's aligned on the commercial side, you're going to see those adoption rates go up in a hockey stick curve, similar to what you saw with passenger vehicles.
I think you're right. And
Yep.
I think probably, in the context of where we are, though, it's very important to understand this, which is that, 65% of the fleets out there have 10 or fewer vehicles. So they're smaller companies. So
Yep.
the decisioning happens a little bit differently. Not that your three T's shouldn't be followed, because actually, probably even more so. These are people that at 11 o'clock at night is when they're going to be doing stuff. They don't have time otherwise. So I agree with you that building more and more visibility, transparency, and the transaction part, it actually should end up being easier. We're as a company, we're continuing to work towards that, because before COVID, even in 2019, about 60% of all commercial vehicles were bought sight unseen. Not online, but because they knew it was a white truck, by the way, that had this, and this. Now, that's good, and that means that there should be kind of an opportunity, but there's also, you saw 25,000 plus configuration. So overall, we have to be really good at helping people understand the fit between the configuration and their use case. And that's what we keep moving closer and closer to, right?
Yeah, if you've ever, yeah,
Mhm.
Catherine, real quick, if you've ever purchased an EV vehicle, whether it's commercial or passenger, it is extraordinarily cumbersome to try to find all this information. You have to go to government websites to look for incentives and rebates. You have to go to to the OEM site to kind of build out the vehicle. What I think you have a unique opportunity, or this space does, whether it's you or anybody, is you can provide that one stop where the customer can take that journey all the way through. You already have all the uplift configurations. You're uniquely positioned in that space. And so that transaction piece is probably going to be critical to just move them down into that at high intent, low funnel activity of transactions.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. And, we really, one of the things when we launched Convoy was we wanted to make sure that not only was it the best listing place as a marketplace, because a true marketplace takes the customer and gets them to what they're looking for as quickly seamlessly and frictionlessly as possible. And I think
Right.
we've done that. But we
Yep.
also focused on education. And
Yep.
it's not been as, the need for the listings was the really overpowering thing, especially since we launched in November of 19, and then
Yep.
bam, right? And then
Yep.
we haven't even had any normalcy since then. Then we went from 200,000 vehicles to 40,000 vehicles out there, so it's been kind of a little bit of a roller coaster ride. But now, because we've been tracking the usage cases, we think
Mhm.
there's going to be some really interesting capabilities of mapping data around SIC or NAICS codes and usage and appropriate vehicle matching, right?
Right.
And we don't need to talk about any of this, but I just thought it was very interesting. When you look at the classes of vehicles and what's kind of predicted, there's certain use cases that are going to be much further down the pipe, so to speak, right? But vans have already been identified. They are perfect for an electric vehicle. They have a consistent route. They have a nightly parking. They have a certain, typical weight, and so they're perfect, right, for this. But when you start getting into, cement trucks and dump trucks and things like that, you start running into that weight issue for sure, right?
Yep.
Um, the use of strip chassis for RVs, the other kinds of things, etc., and all of this type of vehicle. I mean, one thing for sure, and of course we're going to get there now, is school buses they're already driving the percentage up. But then
Mm.
you look at things like fire trucks, like a fire truck, like it's scary to think that a fire truck could be electric, right? Because what if? Like in
Yeah.
the consumer world, there was a big discussion at CAR about, the two-car group or a hybrid and a electric, or however your family life is going to be, right? That, you have some choices. But when you've got a vehicle that has to run 100% of the time and it's
Mm.
critical winter, summer, spring, fall, right? It's There's different decisions that get made. So,
That's right.
right. Hydrogen is really going to be an important fuel also. I know that I was at one of the NTEA events about a year and a half ago, and International had announced that they were going to be producing their medium duty as, to use hydrogen instead of diesel, which I thought, well, that's great, So you can see here that we have kind of an estimate of electric fuel cell and hybrid
Mhm.
for this. And there's just not going to be one solution,
Right.
you know, and and there's so many other things that kind of drive that. So I was at a conference that Bobbitt put on last year called Delivery Con, and it was all about what's going on. And I was moderated a panel with the guy that's really overseeing all of the regulations in New York. And, they're not letting, I think it was, I don't know if it was April 1st or when it was, but they're restricting trucks from being able to go into Manhattan, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And that means they need to park outside somewhere, and they have to have some, whether it's electric bikes or whether it's a small vehicle or whatever, they have to have a different way that they solve that problem. And that's really where it is. It's about solving
Yeah.
the problem.
We talked about the tragedy in Baltimore too. The bridge collapsed. The
Yes,
trucks can't fit underneath the tunnels, so they have to figure out alternative transportation methods. They can go 70 miles around the city a
right.
different way, but obviously that adds congestion, that adds time. So this is a great slide to highlight the fact that, hey, listen, things happen in the world and in life, and you really need to look at different solutions as you work with the supply chain and logistics. I I found it interesting. Hydrogen, I double as I work for the my local community on the police and fire reserves force. So I respond to a lot of fire incidents around my Detroit area. And the truck drivers are terrified of hydrogen more than electric because they feel that they're sitting on a bomb.
Uh-huh.
So there's these psychological barriers that people have about some of these things, but
Yes.
I really go back to what that Cobb County commissioner said to us at the Green Trucks. The human problem is the issue. We just need to get out of our own way sometimes and look at different solutions, and also understand that don't be fearful of some of the new stuff. It could benefit us in the long run.
That's why gathering agnostic, neutral, curated data is so important right now. Because I got to
Yeah,
tell you, I came away from conferences a couple years ago thinking that every electric car was about ready to burst into flames, right? I
yeah.
mean, and people do that because they have some plan, something that they want to have happen, like go buy, then I don't know, this whole setup, right? Because of
Yeah.
that, I just think it's wrong. Anyway.
Well, Catherine, in a perfect world, we'd all be propane.
Okay, we're on to that slide yet, Greg. Hold on a minute. We're getting there.
Okay.
So this is thanks again to Escalent. This is kind of their projected class 2B to 8, their zero emission growth. And then I really appreciate that they put this more in context because that looks like fast growth, right? But when you think about it, this is in the millions so right here, this is hundreds of thousands, right? Or right, this is millions. So you can see when you look at it compared to retail, it's a slow, steady growth. And by the end of 2024, this year, retail will be about 10%. Not California, it's already 20, right? But average across the whole country, it's what, about 8 right now, Greg, you think?
9%.
9, okay.
California is 23%.
Yep.
By 2030, we are now charting to 44%.
Uh-huh.
Yep.
And California is raising that by being 60 or something like that. I'm thinking,
Maybe even 90.
yeah, I was, oh no, I live here. Oh, come on. I want to keep my Mustang,
You can.
my stick shift Mustang, right?
You can.
And so like you said, I mean,
Oh,
here's the propane story. I mean, you and
yeah.
I found we had another thing that we really believed in together. Propane is a fantastic fuel. And what I heard was the first time propane came out, there was problems because they hadn't created, the tappets have to be hardened differently. And so there were a lot of engine problems.
Mhm.
And then by the time I got on the scene, there was a resurgence of it. And in fact, I wrote the California uh, a alternative fuels manual in 2012 that was all about CNG and propane, and learned a lot. And I just fell in love with it because for rural markets, propane,
Yeah,
it's like for distribution, it's like, yeah, and let's do it. And it's so clean, right?
it is. Yeah. Um, the other thing about CNG, it's almost like a race to prove out the payback time, right? You're really looking at all these
Yes.
different fuels and trying to understand which one has the shortest payback and where to invest the money. CNG has some issues with methane leaks. And so there's obviously an environmental impact to that. Hydrogen has this weird psychological barrier of sitting on a bomb.
Yeah.
Um, I think the more we can educate in forums like this to really understand what these different alternatives can do, the
And
better.
when would be the right time? What in situation,
Mhm.
would give you the best benefit out of it comparatively, right?
Correct. Yeah.
Well, I wouldn't, I know we're down to less than 5 minutes. We could talk forever. We've already proven that.
Yeah.
But so I have a few slides now just to kind of go back to this concept of why we use connecting the dots as a theme right now. Because when you think of how complex that entire ecosystem was that I painted at the beginning, you have to understand that nobody can do it alone. I mean, you have to have these relationships. And so I've been reading a lot about them, and PACT is accelerating the deployment of nationwide infrastructures for medium and heavy duty, right? So all of these companies that you'd kind of think that they were competitors, and
Mhm.
they're now working together because there's a lot of cost in implementing change. And if you hold hands, there's room for everybody, is really what it boils down to. But you got to approach it that way. And that's really what connecting the dots is about. Now, I know that I've added like 6 more, Greg, since you saw this slide
Oh, wow.
last, or maybe
Yeah.
8 more. These
Yeah.
are all of the new, well, not every single one, like Volta and BrightDrop. Some of them are programs of, the OEMs that exist, but most of them are brand new.
Yeah.
And the question is, what will be happening to them? And, I've I've read and watched a lot about the auto industry, and this reminds me of the early days.
Yeah.
There were so many interesting brands that were out there, and how many of them actually survived. And of course, a lot of them got rolled up. So maybe that'll happen, that's
Yeah.
typically if your stuff's good. But also in the commercial space, if you think about how uniquely specific the use cases are, there may be a chance for a lot more to survive because they're specialists. And that kind of brings me into why there's so many different upfitters, right? A lot of them specializers, over 1,000 maybe. And of course, there's quite a few that are members of NTEA, but there's some that aren't, but it's a long tail. So 2 of the biggest, JB Poindexter, who has kind of but I would say a buffet of different product types. Morgan Olson, Morgan Redding, they have a van upfitting, and EAVX is kind of like their experimental group, and they're experimenting a lot in collaboration with quite a few of the startups that I showed on the previous slide. Knapheide is doing some. Knapheide is the largest single company that does upfits, and they're doing some collaboration with some startups as well. And so it'll be very interesting to see how they maximize the new opportunities, right?
Yep.
So I'm going to give you a minute, Greg, to kind of you do your part of the wrap up, right?
Yeah, no, thank you. I really appreciate the invite and bringing some hopefully new insights to this audience. My contact information is not on this, but hopefully, Catherine, we can get that out to people. If you have questions, I know we didn't save time for questions, but I like Catherine said, I'm very passionate. I'm kind of I nerd out on this stuff, especially the EV side. Never thought I would be an EV driver, but I bought one 3 years ago. Love it and love the fact that the commercial space is moving at a fairly rapid pace to get involved. It doesn't mean ICE is going away or the alternative fuels, but our data is showing that there's and the utility companies should tell the story alone. These folks are going all in on EV education content and down to the transaction level. So
and they understand that businesses are a big part of their business.
massive,
right?
that you saw the PG&E site has commercial TCO on it right now. Yeah.
Well, I appreciate you joining, and I'm so glad that we've started, that we're holding hands on this journey. Look forward to seeing you again
Next week.
next week, but also in our fall session. Well,
Awesome.
I think we could kind of do this for fun twice a year. How's that?
Do it. I love it. Yeah, I'm in.
All right.
Thanks
Thank
so
you,
much.
everybody.